You're listening to part 2 of an interview with the third place winner of the Catholic University Center for Human Rights annual Human Rights Essay Contest. By William Saunders, Director of the Center for Human Rights. To read the award-winning essays, go to humanrights.catholic.edu.
The listener should know, this was a short essay. I'm sure Father Ambrose could have written a book about this subject, but it had to be condensed for this short essay contest. So obviously, this kind of control of the internet has consequences for religious organizations. What would you say some of those consequences are, Father? What are the problems created by Chinese communist control of the internet?
Right. The implications of for the religious freedom um, violations by this kind of censorship, that the Chinese government is perpetrating on her citizens is the fact that it is directly targeted against those who seek to practice and spread a religion. So if you and any kind of religion except for the official Confucianism that they sanction, that they feel that that it aligns with the goal and the aim and objectives of the CPC, the Chinese Communist Party. So it's a negative and unfavorable stance that the Chinese government has taken on religion, by censoring religious individuals, including teachers. Certain literatures are not allowed in the country, and then they don't want to have anything that has to, that they believe or that judge not concurring with Chinese Communist Party is not to be allowed. So the implication is that it is violating this most fundamental human right, the right to worship, the right to be free, and right to freedom, and then of course freedom of information as well, to practice one's religion. And it has in fact it has affected the Catholic Church in a very fundamental way, because Catholic Church is one all over the world, and it's directly, like those who there are different Catholic churches, of course, but then under the one leadership of the Holy Father. But the Catholic Church in China is different, is configured differently. The Vatican had to, make certain concessions in order to, and the government has a lot of stronghold or stranglehold, I should say, on religion, on the Catholic Church and its operations and its organization in China, which is not what it's supposed to be, because then Catholic, the Catholics there are not allowed, to worship God as they are, as they're supposed to be to do, and as other Catholics in other parts of the world do. But then that's just one of the the many instances. You also have some extreme groups, extreme example of a group of your Muslim community that were bad, they were prevented from making a pilgrimage to the holy pilgrimage to Mecca, citing that it might bring religious extremism. And then, of course, there are so many religious leaders who are being detained or who are incarcerated in different prisons because they disseminated religious teachings, you know, and that implies that the CPC is completely in control of over the entire population of China. So that's a very terrible um, stance for any government to take, to have a complete control of how the people should worship or whether they should worship at all or not. So
Father,
they
Father,
right.
look, that's a good description, and people listening should, just understand that what the CCP is doing is a violation of international human rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in various treaties that guarantee religious freedom, not only to worship in your church, but to manifest your religion in the community. So, Father, given these human rights abuses, what can Americans who are listening to this, or maybe somebody in Nigeria will be listening to this, what can they do? What can they do to try to help here?
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Saunders. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned what people outside of China could do, because most of the people in this situation cannot help themselves. Some of them are are so frightened that of either being persecuted or going to prison or being fined or whatever. So, in effect, those who can help them in this situation are those from the outside, the international community. And it is not just those in America alone. It is something that the whole world needs to rise up and condemn and find ways to assist our brothers and sisters in this situation in China. So, so the plight of these religious practitioners in China, it has a global challenge. So first of all, religious believers and organizations would need to around the world, in America and in other parts of the world, need to partner with our brothers and sisters to avoid this technological repression that is going on. Why it is important to stress what America can do is because America is the superpower of the world's superpower, and there's always a far-reaching effect to some policies and legislations that emanate from the United States. So, and a lot of other countries might be able to latch onto it, and of course, world leaders will equally, listen if that's taken seriously. So the relationship, um, of technological powerhouse, which U.S. is, of course, has a high stake in. The partnership that America has with this technological powerhouse that also the Chinese government is trying to use is using to carry out this repression should be leveraged to ensure that those companies, uh, adhere to international human rights standards.
Companies that are doing business in China.
Yes, companies doing business in China, but also, most importantly, companies that are producing these technological devices.
That
Whether they are
doing what? Are doing what?
Companies that are producing
Okay.
the technological devices like smartphones, laptop computers, iPad, and what have you. because America is a huge market for them, and there are partnerships that American government have had with some of these companies, so they can, insist that these companies must adhere to international human rights standards, in in the producing the products they sell to people both home and abroad. And then, secondly, Americans and the international community can also support projects that can help religious practitioners maintain communication with both their fellow believers in other parts of the world and the outside community. And then, of course, we can also talk about directly, international community directly supporting persecuted religious believers. I was so impressed during the last International Religious Freedom Summit that held in Washington, Hilton. A group of Chinese Christians who were rescued and brought into the United States by Americans, and through the intervention of the Congress, came out there in front of all the participants and testified to how they were supported by, Americans, and they were rescued from their, I don't know how many years they were in prison over there until, so apart from just praying in solidarity with these fellow Christians, there is need to provide, more direct support for these persecuted believers, especially the Christian, well, not just Christian, but people of all faiths, or those who are being persecuted for their faith. So there are Catholics and the Protestant churches that are underground, worshiping underground in China, largely cut off by one another, and even denied access to the outside world. Support to people like this will go a long way in ensuring and reassuring them that the choices they have made, the decision they have taken to worship God the way they feel their conscience, has allowed them to do is a right decision, and that they are in the, within their rights to do so. And Americans will really need to be a little bit creative, because China is a technological giant, and they have, they're coming up with very new initiatives, through which they are doing all of these things. So America will need to really think out of the box, as they say, to be sure that China is stopped. Right.
Okay, Father, look, thank you very much. Those are wise words. I do want to say to the people listening, he mentioned Ambassador Brownback. So Ambassador Brownback is a fellow of our center, as is Chen Guangcheng, and he's a former U.S. senator and a former U.S. governor, but he is also the former U.S. ambassador for international religious freedom, and he is teaching teaches a course on international religious freedom as part of my human rights program, and my students were able to participate in this summit on international religious freedom, which took place in Washington in January, because of our program. So that's another reason, if you have any interest in studying human rights, I really urge you to look into our program. But for now, I'll just say thank you to Father Ambrose, and we'll see you here next time on another podcast of the Barefoot Lawyer Reports on China.
The Catholic University of America's Center for Human Rights has published a documentary on the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights. The documentary features world-class human rights experts, from former State Department officials to ambassadors and human rights activists. It can be found on our website, at humanrights.catholic.edu.